Hi there, and thank you so much for looking at my channel. In this video we're in the world of algebra and we're going to look at a topic that seems to strike fear into the hearts of many. We're looking at quadratic equations. No need to worry though, because as with many topics in algebra, all we need to do is learn a couple of rules and follow a series of steps. And that's what we're going to do here. Let's start by having a look at exactly what a quadratic equation is. And it is simply an equation where the highest power of x is x squared. If there are no powers of x's, it's not quadratic. If there are any higher powers, x to the power 3 to the power 4, again, it's not quadratic. On the screen here, we have a quadratic equation in what is called its standard form. It starts with the x squared. We then have a multiple of x and a single number, and it's set to 0. We will have a look later, but you can get questions where the equation is laid out slightly differently to begin with, and we need to rearrange it into this formula. What we are looking to do is find the value of x, and in fact with a quadratic equation there will be two values of x. The method we use to solve a quadratic equation is factorizing, and with a quadratic, when we factorize, we end up with two sets of brackets, and this is what we're going to look at next, how to factorize into the two brackets. So the first thing we do when we are looking to factorize a quadratic equation is to open the two sets of brackets and place an x at the beginning of each bracket. Now the next step is a little piece of mental arithmetic. We need to find two numbers, one for each bracket, and those two numbers have to follow two rules. First of all, they have to be two numbers which, when multiplied together, make C, or whatever the number is at C. They also have to add together to make the number that is at B. The best way to do this is to look at all the pairs of factors of C and work out which of them add up to make B. Let's look at an example with the numbers in. So here we have a quadratic equation. X squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. So in fact the C we are given as 6 and the B is the 5. So we open a pair of brackets, and in each of those brackets we put an x in the first part. We need to find a pair of numbers that multiply to make 6. Well, of course we could have 1 and 6. 1 times 6 is 6. We could have 2 times 3 is 6. We need to look at each of these pairs of factors and decide whether one of them also adds together to make 5. And of course in this case it's 2 and 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 times 3 is 6. So that satisfies both of our rules. Therefore those are the numbers that we would put in the brackets. And because both numbers are positive, we'll deal with minuses later, it's x plus 2, x plus 3. And because the original equation is equal to 0, this continues to be equal to 0. Now at this point, it is a really good idea to check that you have the right numbers. And the way you would do this would be to expand the brackets back out again using the FOIL method. So if we multiply x times x, we get x squared. If we multiply x times 3, we get plus 3x. X times 2 is plus 2x, and 2 times 3 is 6. And if we collect like terms, we end up with x squared plus 5x plus 6, which is where we started. So that's a good guide that we have found the right numbers in this case. But we haven't quite finished at this point. Once we get to the x plus 2, x plus 3 part here, we still need to find the values of x. Now, if you look at what we have in front of us here, we have two brackets which when multiplied together equals 0. Now the only way that could be true is if one or other of the brackets was worth 0. It has to be something times 0 for the answer to be 0. And in fact it could be either of these brackets. So it could be that what is in the first bracket, x plus 2, is equal to 0, but it could also be that the contents of the second bracket, x plus 3, is equal to 0. Now if this were the case, if x plus 2 is 0, then x must equal minus 2. If x plus 3 was 0, then x must equal minus 3. And these are our two answers for this quadratic equation, that x is equal to minus 2 or minus 3. Here's another quadratic. We have x squared plus 2x equals 15. Again, we know it's quadratic, the highest power of x is squared. But in this case, it's not in the standard format. We need it to have equals 0 on the end. So the first thing we would have to do in this case is to rearrange it. So x squared plus 2x remain the same, but we need to bring the 15 to the other side of the equation, and of course it therefore becomes a minus 15, and now we have nothing on the right hand side. So now we have the formula in the correct format. Open the brackets. This is the same with each example, and we put the x in the beginning of each bracket. Now, don't forget the rule. We now need to find a pair of numbers that multiply to make minus 15 and also add up to 2. So let's have a look at the factors of minus 15. Well, 1 and 15 are factors. Don't forget one of them would have to be a minus for the answer to be minus. So we could have 1 times minus 15, or we could have minus 1 times 15. Of course, another pair of factors of 15 are 3 and 5. So we could have 3 times minus 5 or minus 3 times plus 5. What we need to do now is look down this list to see whether there are a pair of numbers that when added together will make plus 2. And of course, here we are. Minus 3 plus 5 combine to make plus 2. So here we have x minus 3, x plus 5. And again, if you are not sure, then the best thing to do is to expand these brackets out again. Let's do that quickly. Using FOIL, we would have x times x is x squared. We would have x times 5, which will be plus 5x. We then have x times minus 3, minus 3x, and we have minus 3 times plus 5 is minus 15. So again, if we collect them together, x squared plus 5x minus 3x is plus 2x minus 15. We are back where we started. So we have the correct numbers in there. Let's go back then to our brackets, and don't forget we have equals 0 on the end. So using the same logic, if this bracket multiplied by this bracket equals 0, then one of those brackets must be valued at 0. So either x minus 3 is 0 or x plus 5 is 0. Let's look at the two examples. If x minus 3 is 0, then x would be equal to 3. If x plus 5 is 0, then x would be equal to minus 5. Therefore, the solutions to this quadratic is x is equal to 3 or minus 5. And let's take a look at a final example just so we can be sure of the rules. This time we have x squared minus 9x plus 20 equals 0. So we are following exactly the same procedure as we did in the last two. There are the brackets, and we have x in each. Now let's have a look at the factors of 20. Well, we have 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and we have 4 times 5. Now the problem here is slightly different because, of course, the 9 is a minus, so we are looking to find a minus 9. Now we need to remember in this situation that if we are looking for factors, we could also have the minus numbers because 2 minuses make a plus. So another set of factors could be the minus versions of the ones we had above. Minus 1 times minus 20 is plus 20, minus 2 times minus 10, and minus 4 times minus 5. And these are the things we need to be considering when we're working with the minus. In this case, down at the bottom here, we have minus 4 times minus 5. That satisfies our plus 20, but also minus 4 minus 5 when added together give us minus 9. So these are the two numbers that we need to put in the brackets. This is where factorising gets a little tricky because you have to use the negatives and the positives and work out which way you need to multiply them to satisfy both of our rules. So in this case, we then have x minus 4 equals 0, or we have x minus 5 equals 0, and in the first case x must therefore be equal to 4, and the second case x is equal to 5. So these are our two values of x. So to summarise, we start with a quadratic equation. If it looks a little different, we rearrange it into this format. Our next step is to open two sets of brackets and put the x at the beginning of each bracket. We are then looking for two numbers. They have to multiply together to make the last number, and they have to add together to make the multiple of x here. So we are looking at factors of the last number, in this case the 20. We write down the factors, and we are looking from those factors for a pair from which we can add together and create 9. The minuses and the positives need to be taken into consideration. Once you have the numbers in, a great way to check is to expand the two brackets out again using FOIL, and if you've got them right, you will end up back where you started. Once you're happy you have the right numbers, you then have to realise that for the two brackets to be equal to 0, then one of those brackets must be worth 0. You can then use the figures in the brackets to work out the value of x, and you will end up with two answers always. Well, I hope you found that useful. If you did, as always, could you hit the subscribe button below here, please, and also the notifications button so that you'll get to hear of any new videos that I bring out. Please do feel free to leave your comments, and I promise I will get back to you. Thank you.